Welcome back, lovely movers, to another solo episode of Make Movement Matter, a mini. On this podcast, we don't often talk about exactly what natural movement is, which is what I coach, and yet it's the thing that I am most passionate about. When I first started telling people that I was training in natural movement, they had to ask me to explain what on earth that meant, and often it took me a long time to tell them. But certain themes in terms of their questions kept coming up. And they were the questions that I had when I was researching natural movement, when I found it in the first place. So I thought it was worth, by way of explanation, answering a few of those common ones today. One of the main ones I often still get is, so I'm active, I walk, I exercise, I'm probably fine, aren't I? I always answer, being active is brilliant. Obviously, if you're active, you're ticking that move more principle of my Move Well wheel that I talk about in the 6 principles in my book. And the research is really clear that even small amounts of activity compared to stillness improve your health outcomes hugely. And obviously, longer stints of exercise, even better. We all know that because we've been told it so much. But the reality is that exercise can't fully offset the stillness of the other hours of the day. And that's why breaking up long stretches of sitting really does matter. I'm not meaning that you have to constantly be on the go, because of course rest is key for recovery and responding to what your body's telling you about whether you've done too much, but also whether you've done too little. But the most important answer here is that it's not just about the fact that you are doing, the fact that you are being active. It's also what you're doing and the way that you're doing it. I always say, but are you moving with variety? And when they then ask, what do you mean by variety? I would then push back to them with some questions. Things like, when you go about a normal day, do you tend to just do tasks in the same way every time? Do you always carry things on the same side? Do you sit in the same shapes? Do you think about the shapes your body is making, or are you simply getting the task done? Because if movement is always happening on autopilot, there may be some inputs missing. Variety nourishes your joints, your muscles, and even your brain. So I'd like you to ask those questions of yourself today. Just notice, are you moving on autopilot? Are you moving with variety, or do you do things in the same way every time? And that brings up the interesting question of, well, which other ways would I move? And yet the second question that I often get asked is, surely we don't need coaching to move. It's automatic, isn't it? And that absolutely does make sense, because that's what I used to think before I got into pain. I assumed that because I was functioning and I wasn't in lots of pain at the time, I was fine. I literally only questioned my own capability when I saw someone doing something extreme, but then didn't think that actually applied to me, didn't think that was relatable. I've obviously just been talking about moving on autopilot, but it's more than that. It's about the fact that we're all now living in this same modern environment that is built for comfort, but ultimately is also creating more stillness. And so we need to start working around that to make sure that we have the inputs our bodies need. For example, we use chairs instead of the floor. We use escalators and lifts instead of stairs. Wheeled suitcases instead of carrying, travelators instead of walking, furniture designed for comfort and for convenience to avoid needing that use of the floor. And yet, if that means we never go down to the floor on a daily basis, how do we expect our bodies to be capable of doing that when they basically don't get any practice doing so? When we recognize that our environment is narrowing the range of movements we need to use to live, and also social norms mean that we do what everyone does around us and nothing different, then how would we know that something is missing unless you started following me? So have a think about, when was the last time you got down to the ground without it being part of a class? When did you last climb or crawl or balance or move side to side or even backwards in different ways? When did you last change the level you were on repeatedly during the day, floor, seated and up higher? Normal doesn't mean nourishing. We have standardized our movements through this modern world environment. And when it becomes standardized, that variety and therefore capability gradually disappear. So once I convinced people that being active and exercising isn't even enough, it's more the ways we're moving. And also, once I convinced them that our environments were actually doing us sometimes more harm than good, the next question would always be, so what are the right things we should be doing? And obviously that is what I coach. That is what I have written about. That's what I do these podcasts about and all sorts. But it's really important to hone in the word right things, because there isn't a right movement and there isn't a wrong movement for your body. We are built in such an incredible way that we can move in such varied ways that there's never anything wrong about moving. And I think once we remove that narrative, things become a little bit more playful and more curious. But what there is there's responsiveness to what your body is signaling you that it needs. So starting to become aware that stiffness or brain fog, becoming more irritable or hesitating to do something or even avoiding it, these are all signals that something isn't quite right, something's missing, something more is needed. Then when you have that awareness, because you've tuned into those feelings, then you start to really notice when autopilot isn't doing you a service, and you start to think of the alternatives. You start to look around you for opportunities to bring in that variety and have a bit more fun with it. So start by noticing what your body hasn't done for a while, particularly of the things I've been talking about today. And as you're going about your modern life world existence, notice how it's narrowed your options. So it really is not about adding in big chunks, because you're doing that anyway if you're exercising. It's about mixing up those movements sprinkled throughout the day and opposing patterns that funnel you into that sameness of moving. If you're curious what more variety would look like in your life, that's the conversation I have with people every day in my signature course particularly, where we help to build exactly that. We build more variety in your daily life, not just giving you a set of instructions. So this week, just notice your patterns, notice your autopilot, and if you can spot somewhere to mix things up, then try it. And now, as is becoming tradition on my solo episodes, let's try something simple now, just to show you what a small shift can do to your energy, how your joints feel. So we're going to do something today called sumo arm drops, and we're going to take out my earphones, which hopefully won't affect anything, so that I can move better and stand back a little. So I may go a little bit quieter, I hope not too much. So you're not going to be able to see all of me on video, but I'm going to describe it obviously for those listening on audio anyway. Taking your feet nice and wide, wider than hip width, turning the feet out slightly, making sure your weight is deeply into your heels. You're going to start by hinging at the hips and bending the knees slightly to lower down and come back up. And just do that a couple of times to warm in to the hip and knee joints. A little click here and there perhaps. You're now going to increase the lower to a double bounce at the bottom. So you hinge and you bend and you get a little bounce at the bottom, and then another one. 1, 2, and up. Now take your arms up above your head, reaching up high, and then we're going to allow them to drop in wide circles to the side and cross at the bottom, and then come back up. We cross with the first bounce, and then with the second bounce, we come back up. 1, 2, and cross your arms in alternate ways. So left in front of right, and then right in front of left. And just allow the arms to completely drop before you bring them back up. And get a lovely bounce, lovely bit of energy. One more. Yes. And how does that feel? Heart racing a little bit of energy? Notice how you feel. Do you feel more energized? Does the brain feel more alert and bright? And how are those joints feeling now that you've brought some fluid into them? I, for one, feel great. So let's finish on the quote, variety really is the spice of life. And this obviously means that experiencing new, diverse, different things makes life more interesting and more enjoyable. It actually comes from William Cooper's 1785 poem, The Task, which I didn't know before. And just like spices in food stop a meal being so bland, the same is true for our bodies. When your movement becomes repetitive, predictable, and narrow, things start to feel stiff and stagnant and heavy. But when you introduce variety, things feel more fluid, more capable, more alive. So look for the spice, mix it up, make those small shifts, because when you change the way you move, you absolutely change the way you feel.